What do you get when you combine one of the best free-to-play games in history with a game you have to play like it's your part-time job just to keep up? Why, none other than Nexon's newest 9-to-5 simulator, the First Descendant. But how does this fresh new Skinner box stack up to the tried-and-true time vampires we all know and love, such as Warframe and Destiny 2? In this video, I, Rainverse, a man known far and wide for having only the most correct opinions on video games, will enlighten you to why the First Descendant is actually pretty good. Although you should probably still not bother with it. But before I inject my wisdom directly into your prefrontal cortex, please consider subscribing to the channel as it fuels my ego and, of lesser importance, lets me know what kind of content you want me to be making. To start off, I do have a confession to make. This is not the video I intended to make when I decided to cover the First Descendant. That video would have explored the free-to-play aspect of the game with the goal of finding out just how long it would take a free player to craft an ultimate descendant. I ended up burning out on the game before even reaching the end game, so that should give you a clue as to where I'm going with this. What this video will be about is the quality of this game when compared to other free-to-play alternatives. So, let's take a look at what kind of game the First Descendant is so we can judge it harshly based on its own merits, or lack thereof. What we have here is an old-fashioned Borderlands-style looter-shooter. You can't really go 5 seconds without picking up several hundred absolutely useless blue weapons, whose only purpose is to be fed to your good weapons using a version of Destiny 2's upgrade module system that could only be crafted in the nightmare-grinding hellscape that is South Korea's gaming industry. We'll get back to this in a moment, but for now, let's talk about the most unique feature of the First Descendant. When it comes to these types of games, it's common knowledge that movement needs to be good. After all, if you're going to be spending hundreds of hours of your life grinding for ever shinier trinkets instead of not disappointing your family, you'd obviously go with the one that feels better to play, right? Warframe has extreme ninja parkour. Destiny 2 has the best movement option in video games with the Warlock jump. But what does this game have? A fucking grappling hook, that's what. The First Descendant's hookshot lets you move around the map at high speed, collect items at range, skillfully fling yourself around corners to navigate instance dungeons faster, or not so skillfully fling yourself to your untimely demise. Grappling around the map feels great, although I feel the range could be longer, and as with Destiny 2's Strand Grapple, it really didn't need a cooldown timer. I will never understand why games give us amazing movement options only to let us use them once every 10 millennia. Imagine if Warframe had a cooldown on bullet jumps. No one would play that game. But I digress. The timer on the grapple isn't super long, and you do have 2 charges to play with. I was able to do some silly bullshit with some careful timing, but I can't help but wonder how much better the experience would have been if I could have just played it like Just Cause 4. Okay. So I've said the name of this game about 30 times now, so let's go over what Descendants are, yeah? In this game, there is no set player character. You take the role of whatever Descendant you feel like using at a given time. You can think of them like Warframes, except not as cool. When beginning the game, you're given a selection of 3 Descendants that can vaguely be defined as Support, DPS, and Tank. Except Viessa is actually fucking useless as far as I can tell, so realistically you've got 2 choices. I chose Lepic because he has a laser cannon arm and his skills basically boil down to push button every 30 seconds to make number go up, which is perfect for someone like me who can identify every crayon by taste. Aside from the obligatory starter Pokemon, there are several other Descendants you can farm the components for or just outright buy, most of them being useless for a free player because you're going to be doing 99% of your farming with Sharon due to the bonus drops from her stealth ability. Of course, the end goal of the grind is to obtain an ultimate Descendant, which is comparable to a primed Warframe, except somehow less hot. As I mentioned before, you can also just buy these things, where regular Descendants cost just a few bucks, and Ultimates can cost you between $70 to $100, depending on which bundle you go for. The irony here is that an Ultimate Descendant actually does cost about the same as a primed Warframe, and I'd still say the frame is the better value since you actually get a ton of premium currency as part of the deal. The gameplay loop of the First Descendant is fairly simple. You go from map to map clearing various missions given in the style of Destiny 2's patrols, with each area ultimately ending in an instance dungeon similar to a strike. After doing this 2 to 3 times per zone, you are tasked with fighting a Colossus in a raid-style encounter. These are actually pretty cool, and I would say they're one of the main highlights of the game, especially since the rest of the combat is just bullet sponge enemies. This repeats until you finish the story, I would assume. I stopped 2 or 3 areas short of finishing the main story because of an issue we'll be talking about in a moment. So now we know what the First Descendant offers in terms of gameplay. So let's tear it apart by comparing it to better games. Well, one better game and one okay game that I've spent way too many hours playing. The main issue I have with this game, and the very reason I stopped playing, is weapon leveling. Weapons drop within a specific level range depending on the map you're on, with the instance dungeons dropping the highest level weapons in each map. This is fine on paper, but the enemy levels ramp up so quickly that you are constantly having to use these upgrade items to transfer levels from a worse weapon with a higher level to a better weapon with a lower level. Otherwise, you're stuck using dogshit blue drops instead of the tamer you painstakingly farm for because YouTube told you to. The entire issue stems from a terrible attempt at lifting Destiny 2's infusion system, which just doesn't work for a game like this where you're constantly getting new weapons. This is because the item you need to transfer levels is rarely given out, so you're forced to craft it. Now, this isn't really an issue for low rarity weapons, as you can get the materials for those really easily. The issue is that the higher tier weapons require a different item, which requires tons of materials that you only get from scrapping other weapons, and even then you have to wait for it to be crafted. In Destiny 2, you can just get an upgrade module to drop or buy one from Banshee for a few enhancement cores and immediately use it. Eventually, this just gets to be too much, because you end up with good weapons you can't use because the only item that raises their level is a pain in the ass to obtain. Meanwhile, in Warframe, your weapons just level up as you use them, which makes far more sense than what we ended up with in the First Descendant. This is really my main issue with the game, to be honest. Drop rates being terrible is just free-to-play games in general, so who cares about that? Primed parts in Warframes have like a 2% drop rate from Radiant Relics and no one complains about that. It's just this weapon upgrade system that sours the entire experience for me. And that's a shame, because the First Descendant did take some of the best parts of Warframe to use in its system, such as the mod polarities. In case you've never played Warframe, basically you just match the symbols on your mods to the symbols on your mod slots to halve their cost. The moment I first saw the mod screen in the First Descendant, I knew exactly what to do with it. It's great. In fact, even upgrading your mods and obtaining the resources necessary to do that work almost identically to Warframe, although I think the selection of mods currently available in the First Descendant don't really allow for the kind of flexibility Warframe does, but it's a start at least. Overall, what does the First Descendant have over Warframe and Destiny 2? Both games beat it in terms of weapon choice. Warframe has better mods and movement. So what does the First Descendant actually offer besides frustration and that Nexon greed we've come to dread over the last decade? If you're thinking sex appeal, you're wrong, because Warframes have the fattest asses you'll ever see in a video game. It's not a bad game. It's really not. There's just better options in the same genre. So would I recommend you to play the First Descendant? Not really, just play Warframe. Don't play Destiny 2 though, it's a shit show right now. If you've played the First Descendant and feel differently, feel free to speak your mind in the comments. For better or worse, I do read them all. However, that is all from me for now. As always, I've been Rainverse, and we will meet again, but only if you leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Also, I don't know what voice I'm using right now, I just hit record and started going.